loving me, I loving you. Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.
How can we build resilience to ensure positive relationships? Welcome to Making It Last podcast. I'm your host, Noreen Daly, and that is what we're going to be talking about this time around. And to do that, we have Kristin MacdDermott. She's a family and business therapist, a licensed marriage and family therapist. She classifies herself as a resilience expert, and in fact, she wrote a book about that. So she's also an author. Welcome, Kristin.
Thanks for having me.
Tell me a little bit about the book.
Well, I spent the last 20 years studying and teaching resilience. And so I did my research actually in the world of cancer. I worked in a hospital and, because people got me whether they wanted me or not, when they were hooked up to those chemotherapy infusions for hours at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized is that, people weren't looking for a long-term relationship with a therapist. They were looking for skills and tools that they could use, right away to quiet the craziness that was going on in their minds and make the decisions and communicate and just all those things. And so out of that, I ended up developing a curriculum of skills. So really everything I do is break resilience down into these individual skills that anyone can learn. And so the book is my attempt to break it down into even smaller bite-sized pieces. So actually, it's a picture book. I mean, you open it, you turn it to any page. On one side is a beautiful, compelling photograph that if you pay attention, it's related to the skill. But on the other side is a skill that you can read in a minute or two and apply to your life immediately. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I learned that, if I could have, I have research that shows that my curriculum works, it improves people's lives. But if you don't have something that people will actually use,
that's true.
It doesn't matter if it works, right? So I sort of found that out the hard way by having things that were too big, these online curricula that were it was too much. And so now I try to do everything in these little bite-sized pieces.
Okay. It's therefore a nice background or orientation to what we're going to be talking about, which is how can we build resilience to ensure positive relationships? For somebody who's listening and wondering what you mean by resilience, how would you then define that term?
Yeah, so this is a great one because actually the cool thing about resilience is that it does automatically help you improve relationships. And so I have a model that has 9 components to it, but let me just talk about a couple of them. So One of the parts about resilience is really emotional intelligence. So just understanding what causes your emotions, how your emotions impact you, how can you control your response to emotions. And so when you develop that level of self-awareness about your own emotions, you automatically have empathy. Right? You can understand that. You understand yourself, so you understand others better.
Mm-hmm.
So that improves your relationships while it also makes you more resilient. Because, resilience is about stopping when you realize that you're really challenged and looking within at what you can control, right? And so it's really about you taking responsibility for the next move in your life, which you can imagine that also helps relationships. Because you know how relationships are. It's always about one person blames the other. And what you really want is for you take responsibility for your side.
Right.
I'll take responsibility for my side. Yeah. So those are 2 ways that resilience builds positive relationships. I'll just say one more. One more is that one aspect of resilience that's really important is getting our needs met. So taking responsibility for getting our own needs met in our lives. And in relationships, most conflict in relationships is really around unmet needs. One person feels like, well, you're the one, getting all your needs met, but I'm not getting my needs met, right?
True.
And so learning to talk about talk about your needs and make your own needs a priority gives you resilience, but it also improves your relationship.
I noticed you said you had 9 components. There's no rush. You can actually go through the 9 components.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So I said emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Another component. So this is on, let me just back up a second. So one of these levels is just skills that people need in order to be resilient. So there are a whole bunch of skills around emotional intelligence. Then there are a whole bunch of skills that I call interpersonal skills. So, not just listening well, but also, do you actually know how you come across to other people? Because a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't realize that the way they think they come across is actually quite different from how people receive them. So there are a whole bunch of skills in you know what I mean? Yeah. Do you want to say something else about that?
No, I'm saying yes because I do that a lot sometimes because I'm in charge of a department in my professional life, and sometimes after I've done or said something, I'll ask some of my colleagues, so how was that? Because I've been told sometimes that I'm a little terse and not as tactful as I'd like to be. So yeah, so
well,
I can relate.
That is actually, it's so cool that you do that because feedback is a big thing, and that's another one of those interpersonal skills is just inviting feedback, but a lot of people don't. For a lot of times when someone tries to give someone, especially like you're saying in the work environment, some constructive feedback, some people can take that as criticism and sort of shut down or feel like they've failed, right? And so I think that's an aspect of resilience is to actually welcome feedback so that you can learn. And again, like the more you are self-aware about what's going on that's affecting your world and your life and your relationship, the more control you can have, and the more you can affect the outcomes you want in your life.
I know you've been enjoying the conversation, but we're going to take a little break and get a word from our sponsor.
Are you struggling to become an effective communicator? Let Noreen Daly, the communications specialist, get you there. Services include communications consultancy, one-on-one coaching, public speaking and debate training, leadership and team building sessions, plus much more. Visit noreendaly.com for more info. Noreen Daly, redefining the way you communicate.
It's interesting that in less than 10 minutes, you've mentioned the whole idea of self-awareness, several times. This is my question to you. Do you think this is something that comes with age, or let me say that differently? For me, at my age, I've gotten to a point where I am open to all of that because I have a strong sense of self. But it took me a while to get there. Maybe I will say after my 30s into my 40s, maybe. There's some people are not quite there yet. So what then would you say to somebody who's saying, I recognize that sometimes when people will give me feedback on my behavior, I get defensive. What would you say to that? Is it that it's going to come with time? What is your response to that?
I would say that if you go ahead and lean into that and consider the idea that actually you can learn so much and you're going to learn it more quicker if you open up to it as opposed to resist it, right? Because you can learn it the hard way.
True.
Because eventually you'll get bashed over the head enough times that you'll take it in. But, this is one of the things I love teaching kids because just this idea that it's like, look at sports teams, for example. Like when kids play sports, they realize you take feedback from your coach. Because if you don't, you're not coachable and they're not going to want you on their team.
Right.
So, when the sooner people can realize that you actually want feedback, feedback doesn't mean you're failing. It means, how are you supposed to know unless someone tells you? You're not born knowing everything. And you're right. People do, as we grow up, we typically, learn more and more and become more self-aware. But it's so much easier if you intentionally do it.
Okay.
And children can learn this from a really early age, and then they're just better equipped to start managing themselves and making good decisions, way earlier.
True. Share some more components with us.
So on the skills level, one of the things that I found working in the cancer world also is that just a lot of that emotional intelligence stuff is really from cognitive behavioral therapy. It's realizing that emotions don't just happen to you. Your emotions are caused by thoughts and they drive your behavior, and that which impacts how other people respond to you. So it's great information because you can do a lot with it. But cleaning up your thoughts or paying attention to your thoughts, it's not always easy. especially when you think of like beliefs, which is another component. You know, we all have beliefs that really shape our lives, and some of them we don't even realize. So like the one I always think is a great example is a lot of people think they want to be wealthy, right? I want to be really financially successful, but they don't actually realize that they hold beliefs that money is bad, that money ruins people, that money, right? That money ruins relationships. And so my point is that it's really important to become aware of what, you know, thoughts and beliefs are impacting your life. But it's not easy work, because when you're, you know, I'm 52. By the time you're 52, you've been carrying around a lot of beliefs. So there's a whole other component to this, which is really inner wisdom. It's really that, you know, we have a place inside of all of us. You don't have to use inner wisdom. You could call it your gut feeling or your intuition or your higher self or coming from the heart. But, you know, there's a place where we can kind of feel in our bones when our minds have kind of gone down a rabbit hole, or when something is really good for us or not good for us. And we're not always taught to pay attention to that, but you know, that's what makes us human. We don't just react to things. We have the ability to witness our own mind, which is pretty cool. And so there are these things called mind-body skills. And so these are things like guided visualization and mindfulness, but there are also things like drawing and stream of consciousness writing, things that intentionally drop you beneath that chatter of your mind, which can't always be trusted. Yeah, to the place that I call inner wisdom. So to me, that was one of the things that really came out of my cancer research, was just that, yes, thinking is really an important tool that we as humans have, and we want to think well and constructively. But there's this whole other thing where we can relax ourselves and tune into really a higher level of being that will take care of ourselves if we utilize that.
There might be somebody listening and saying, "Oh, this lady's talking about higher being and all of that. That sounds, you know." I'm gonna say, because I know somebody's gonna listen to it and they're gonna say, "What is this Noreen is having this lady talk about?" So elaborate on that for me, please, because I think sometimes once people hear those terms, they think only in one direction.
So let me elaborate on that. I love that you asked me to elaborate on that, because so for example, you can think of limiting beliefs that someone might have, right? I'm not good enough. I'm not smart. You know, I'm not good at relationships, whatever they are. But those, let's just say it's I'm just not good enough, right? There's a part of us, there's a part inside of each of us that actually is there when we calm ourselves down, and it's there, and it's that little voice that says, well, I mean, I've been told I'm not good enough. I've thought for a long time I'm not good enough, but maybe I am. But we silence that voice a lot if we go through life, and we just, we what happens with beliefs is that we look for evidence of what we already believe. And so if you've been believing that you're not good enough for 50 years, it's hard to find the other evidence, but it's there. It's the reason why, someone finally after years leaves a bad relationship. It's just, there's that part inside of them that is I deserve better.
Right.
I deserve better. That's the part that I'm talking about. When we stay in a situation that doesn't feel good to us, and there's a part of us that knows we shouldn't, but we do it out of fear, or we do it out of some other limiting belief. That's what I'm saying, is our minds sometimes collect a bunch of thoughts that really don't serve us. And we can feel in our guts when we could do something that would feel better to us and serve us better.
I'm smiling because I am in an environment sometimes where I do, well, it's not just young people who sometimes say some things that definitely shows that they have some limiting beliefs. So it's interesting, that you said that, because how then for some who that's all they've heard, and you want to then say to them, hey, move beyond this because you're bigger than this, because you're working against maybe 17, 18 years of what has been, what they've been fed with. How do you try to go against all of that?
So that is why. So if you just try to work with it cognitively, they're going to resist you. It's like, well, I have all of this evidence that it's true. That's why there are these things called mind-body skills. So if you do a drawing, it's just all of a sudden, you can see something visually that your mind didn't have a chance to like put the limiting belief on there. Or if you do, free form writing, like we'll do something. These, I didn't invent these. This is there's a whole body of research about these kind of tools. But so, you'll dialogue with your emotion, right? Where you're writing both sides. Like you're saying, like, if your anger could speak to you, what would it say? Or guided visualization where you're relaxing and you're going on a journey of, maybe having a conversation with a younger version of yourself. There are ways that you can access like your kind of that knowing that I'm talking about. And that is not just like arguing with someone. It's a whole different way of approaching it.
Okay. Interesting, because I actually have some people around me right now. I need to apply some of those things. Any other components you want to share with us before we go?
We talked about a lot of them. I think strengths is really important, taking ownership of what your personal strengths are, because, something that people don't always realize, but is, self-esteem and self-worth, we have to earn it. We have to earn our own sense of self-esteem. And we do that. I think, two things to think about is if you structure your life around your strengths, things that come easy to you, that you are good at, that like you're going to feel empowered when you're living in your strengths, right? And then the other thing is your values. So when you decide what matters to you, and then you live your life accordingly, you feel good about yourself.
That's true.
So there are really concrete ways that you can build your sense of self-worth, which then, as you can imagine, not only builds your resilience, but going back to your original question, if you feel better about yourself, you're going to have better relationships because you're showing up as a better version of yourself, right?
I know you've been enjoying the conversation, but we're going to take a little break and get a word from our sponsor. So, the whole idea of a branding strategy sounded so exotic and so fancy to me. But after having several conversations with Neon, I now have a clearer understanding. I am sure of what my identity is, what it is that I want people to see Noreen Daly as. Thanks, Neon. Thanks, Splint. Visit them at wearesplint.com. If somebody listened to all of what you said just now, they're like, Kristin, this is all heavy stuff, for want of a better way of describing it. What then would you say to somebody who's still cynical, still a little skeptical about all of this? What then would you say to that person?
So I realize, because there's so much, because I've been doing this for so long, that there's like too much in my head. But what I have gotten really good at is breaking it down into these tiny bite-sized pieces. So my book is that, but also I have just launched 2 online courses, and all they are is these little less than 10 minute audio lessons come in your inbox, and it's less than 10 minutes, and it's super easy to understand. There's nothing like, hard to understand in them. And one of them is called resilience-based parenting. And one of them is parenting through divorce. But the point is that we're trying to help parents have conversations with their kids. So these are, again, concepts that kids, 8-year-olds can understand. So taken individually, they're super easy, but when you put them all together, they all pull from this giant curriculum that I've done 4 studies with researchers at Duke. I've done randomized control trials. It works, but I have gotten good at breaking it down, because you're right. It can be overwhelming, but I promise the way I deliver it is like these little simple things, and you're like, oh, I knew that, but I heard that a little differently this time. And I'm going to try that this week.
All right. So this is how you're going to do this now as we're wrapping up. What then would be a 3-step process to build resilience that would then ensure positive relationships?
A 3-step process. I think one of the first things that someone could do is ask someone that they trust. If this is hard, but if you're bold, ask someone who really, really has your best interest at heart, and say, like, if there was one piece of feedback you could give me that you think would help me in my life, what would it be? That would be one thing I would do. Another thing I would do is I would identify what is an unmet need in my life. Like, what is the thing if I'm really honest with myself, like, this need isn't getting met. Like, I need to feel respected, or I need to feel supported, or I need whatever it is. I need more adventure. It could be anything. I would say identifying one unmet need and an action step you could take towards getting that met. That would be another step that I would take. And the third thing I would do is identify those things that you can do that make you feel a positive emotion no matter what. Like, sometimes, this seems silly, but it's really important to have them. Like, maybe it's a favorite song, or maybe it's a person, or maybe it's something funny that you can watch. But like, having those things identified that we can turn to when we just are ready to feel better, and using them intentionally. Like, for me, going for a run, whatever it is, petting the dog, but being intentional about taking control of when you want to shift to a better feeling emotion, having the tools and taking control of that.
Thank you so much, Kristin.
Well, you are so welcome. Thank you for having me.
This was Making It Last podcast. I'm your host, Noreen Daly. Until next time, where it's all about helping us to have better relationships, not just with ourselves, but with others.
Making it last is all I care to do. You loving me, I loving you. Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.